Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We know we had a little bit of a short break this time around, coming back from your networking sessions. So now welcome to the panel discussions. We've got 4 amazing panelists, as you can see. Here we've got some color coordination going on at the top there. And we also have some of the darker colors in the corner, and then I'm coming here with the bright. So they seem to be a little bit of like an unknown matching going on. So without further ado, I'm going to give everybody the opportunity to introduce themselves. So we're going to first start with Adam, and then we'll go to Amanda.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm pleased to be here, and thank you for Natasha, Nastasia, and Anne for having me here today. So I'm 50, probably the oldest one, I'm quite sure here. Father of 2 kids. I came in France as a luggage of my mother when I was 4 months from Algeria to join my father. So I grew up in France and graduated there up to my PhD. After that, I went to the US for a short postdoc and came back for an MBA in France. And then started a 20 years entrepreneurial journey, building bridges between industry, academia, and society in health, digital health, and now also trying to expand on a more holistic view, so what we call the medicine of the person. So not as a patient, but taking it as a whole on a holistic view. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam. Amanda, over to you.
Okay, so thank you, Annie. I'm very excited to be on this panel session, and I've read a great deal about the panelists. It's amazing to be on board. So my name is Amanda Obidike, and I'm from Lagos, Nigeria. I'm currently the strategy lead and director of STEMI Makers Africa. It's a non-profit organization that focuses on empowering young Africans to become more experienced for Africa's workforce. So we have kind of various programs just to ensure that we are bringing people both from marginalized communities, underrepresented communities in Africa, and giving them the right skills and the competence to match our workforce. So I have backgrounds in business administration, data science, business intelligence, biomedical management. I've actually read a lot, and I think it's maybe due to our fragmented institution that we have in Nigeria, where you just have to do too many things just to become relevant. But once I found my niche, in STEM, I decided to consolidate on it. So that's that about me, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda. Over to you, Samira.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's absolutely wonderful to join everyone on this panel. It's really great, and so I'm here in the United States. I've been here for about 20 years now. I was born in Ghana, and I started school there, but I went to primary school there, and I came to the U.S. From high school through college. Lived in New York for a little while, then Wisconsin, and then to Boston, Harvard for postdoc before taking on faculty position now at Duke University. So I'm currently an assistant professor in the Department of Biomedical Engineering, and also in the Department of Medicine here at Duke. I was trained initially as a chemist. Then I got interested in biology. So for my PhD, I focused a lot on stem cell biology and how to design synthetic microenvironments to direct stem cell differentiation. So in my lab, we focus a lot on how to merge engineering and medicine to basically develop methodologies for developing in vitro models of human organs and tissues so that we can use that as platform for better understanding disease mechanisms and also for discovering therapeutics for some of the most devastating human diseases. So again, it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to sharing more.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And lastly, we have Yaw. Over to you.
I was muted. Hello, everyone. It's really nice to be here. I parrot the comments of the rest of the panel that it's really great to see everyone here and to meet the panelists and hopefully everybody else we'll meet over the course of this conference. So yes, my name is Yaw. I'm from Ghana, so you can see Ghana is coordinating. We are the land of gold anyway, so it's like we knew anyway. But I'm from Ghana. I grew up in Ghana and the UK. My mother is English. But went to high school in Ghana. Then, like Samira, I went to school in the US. So I did college in the US, got my PhD at Northwestern. So I spent about 12 years in the US in total. After my PhD, I taught for 2 years as an assistant professor. I was a bit burnt out from research, so decided to take a break. Taught biology for a couple of years in a university. And then moved to Kenya for my first postdoc, where I worked on the coast of Kenya studying malaria immunology. So I should add, my training is in immunology, so I have a PhD in immunology. And so spent 2.5 years in Kenya studying malaria in children, understanding naturally acquired immunity. Then I moved to London for 4 years, still studying malaria. But of course, as I'm sure you know, there's hardly any, if any, malaria in the UK. So I got to spend my time in Kenya again. So I got to spend winters in Kenya and summers in London. So that was a pretty sweet deal. So I did that for 4 years. And then last year I came back home. That had always been my dream, to relocate back to Ghana. So I joined the University of Ghana as faculty and started my own group. And I'm interested in immunology as it applies to immune function among people living in Africa. So understanding how our exposure to infectious disease influences or shapes our immune system. So we have projects looking at malaria, obviously, but also recently have a student looking at COVID in our context, and now have a student also looking at cervical cancer. So I'm beginning to branch away from infectious, or at least including non-communicable disease, because immunology is broad, so we can sort of look at a number of different things. But what links our work together is trying to understand immune function among African populations. And then finally, this year, I launched a biotech company. So now I'm trying to become an entrepreneur. I'm branching away from academia, or at least trying to stretch a leg into entrepreneurship. And going to be, really excited by that in our pre-seed fundraising right now. So it's hectic, but looking forward to launching a biotech company in Ghana.
Exciting. Wow. So as everybody can see, we've got a pretty diverse panel with people with expertise in various different fields. As you know, the theme for today is navigating your journey through STEM. So that's why we want it to be as diverse as possible. So now the first question that I think I would like to pose to Samira, as we all heard in your introductions, most of you studied abroad, right? So Samira, I just wanted to find out, what was the motivating factor? Why did you decide, or rather, how did you end up studying abroad?
Yeah, so as you could probably recollect from my intro, I came here very early. So it's partly driven by family decisions, right? But as when I was in Ghana, I think I knew very early on that I was just very supported by my family. I never felt that I was not capable of doing anything. I really felt like I could do anything if I ended up in the right environment, had the resources, that I could do things. So when the opportunity came to go abroad, my mom, I should also point out, so neither of my parents actually received formal education. And in fact, my mom's only experience of formal education is watching her peers walk by her to go to school. So she had experiences that she really was the one who taught me the value of education. And so she always prioritized and thought, well, where would you have the kind of training you need to do well? And so I think when the opportunity came to travel abroad, it was really a motivating factor to just be in an environment where I could, the amount of money your family had could probably become irrelevant. Like if you did well, you could excel. And I think I felt that way. Of course, it's still challenging to study abroad, but it felt in some way that you could do well if you actually are focused, have the drive and determination to succeed. And so that really was it. And having my family here also was certainly a factor. So yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's quite interesting that you said that your parents did not have formal education, but yet here you are, well achieved in your own right. So congratulations to that. And just keeping on the theme of studying abroad, I'd like to bring you here, Yaw. I wanted to find out, you've had the opportunity of working in various different countries in Africa and also in the diaspora. So I wanted to find out, when you came back 8 months ago, right? You had this formal education from the diaspora, and I think many of us in the African continent, we want to go out because we think, the education is better. So, in your opinion, do you think that the people who come back home from studying abroad, do they have an added advantage in terms of furthering their career, be it either in research or if they decide to go out in industry?
I think that's a good question. I think actually it's a little bit of both an advantage and a disadvantage. In science, the further along I go, I realize it's less important what I know, but who I'm networked with. Collaborators, senior mentors, you need a network of people to really move your work forward. And so when you go to conferences, my advice to students is network, because you'd have no idea who your next postdoc supervisor is going to be. It might be somebody you have a beer with in the reception talking about your poster. So networking is very important, and that is an advantage that people in the diaspora have, because we go, if you're in the US, you go to conferences, you're meeting people from all over the country, you're sometimes meeting people from Europe if you go to an international conference. And that is something that people trained in Africa, unfortunately, do not yet have. Now, COVID may change that, because now everything is virtual and it's easier to attend some of these large conferences. But certainly, as a student trained at some of the, maybe one of the, leading schools in the US or in Europe, you've had that exposure. And so you're probably a little bit more used to interacting with faculty or senior faculty or people in your field than somebody in Africa. Now, having said that, as somebody who's coming back, you have to realize that you're not in Kansas anymore, right? Literally. When I came back to Ghana, things were different. Yeah, the academic culture is somewhat different. Life is very different. I left Ghana after high school. I had not been an adult in Ghana. I'd never worked in Ghana. My whole working life, from college through, working in the cafeteria in undergrad and then becoming a postdoc and teaching at university, was all in the US. I didn't even have tax records in Ghana, right? I had a US social security number. So, especially if you're thinking of going into entrepreneurship, then you have to understand you need to know the local environment. So I think you have some advantages. Even if you're coming in as an academic, you will not fully understand the academic environment. So I think it's really important to be extremely humble and to align yourself with people who've been there, who've done that. There are lots of people now who have returned. People like me, people who've been here maybe even longer than I have, like 10 years. So it's good to align yourself with people like that. Be humble, ask for advice, and be willing to learn. Do not come with an attitude that you know everything, because you know practically nothing, to be honest, about how to survive as a scientist here. So I think if you play your cards right, you can leverage the networks that you've built in the US to feed into your work here. But that only works if you begin to create an environment, a sustaining environment for yourself locally. And for that you will need, to work with people here. And so being humble is really, really important. I can't stress that enough. Otherwise, it sets people's back against the wall and you won't get anywhere.
That's very important. When you try to come back, you can't come in with a big head like, hey, I'm from the diaspora, I know everything. You cannot do that. Thank you for your reply. Now, I just want to bring in Adam now. Yaw spoke about entrepreneurship, and I know your journey, it's not typical in the sense that it's strictly academic. You've dabbled in a number of different fields. So I wanted to ask you, do you think African students, in particular graduates, are fully prepared to think that their careers in STEM, or rather they can transition into the field of entrepreneurship? And if not, what more needs to be done for people to kind of have that thinking?
First, you got to consider the environment, and Africa. There's a lot of small and medium-sized companies, and and as the continent is growing and getting more and more wealthy, it's slow, but it's getting slowly progressing. It's hard for students to find internships in companies as it is like in Europe or elsewhere in the world. So there might be some restraint from the companies themselves because they're not used to, and they are quite small in the environment, and also from a sense of a censorship from the students themselves, saying like maybe this company is not for me because I don't know what they could do there. So there's probably also an environment condition that we have to work with, and not only consider the students by themselves, but also how we can help company better, take care of the interns. So that's something. Second is, we are talking about STEM. So depending on the field, some fields, like if you consider computer sciences, for example, basically, if you go to an IT company, the investment is quite low. Well, they would need some IT infrastructure, but it's not like if you want to go to a biotech company where the investment to create a biotech company, and Yaw knows that, is just huge. I mean, we're talking about millions in terms of investment, but you can start an IT company with a couple of thousands of USD or whatever the currency you want to use. So then. Depend on the field, right? So it's quite hard. So it makes it harder for the biologists, but there's hope, there's life. There's more and more for people from abroad. I don't know if you know 54 Gene. It's a US company that now have opened a subsidiary in Nigeria, which is like trying to do some genomics on African population, because pharmaceutical industry knows nothing about the genomic background of Black and African population. And so there's going to be more and more companies, and thanks to Yaw also, companies creating and making some rooms for interns. As my experience, because I didn't want to take much about, so I had a subsidiary in Algeria. I just want to make this point, about what Yaw said. And sorry for just going 30 seconds more. You have to be humble, and that's for sure. But also, the environment in Africa can be different, and Algeria is in Africa. And when I came and when I hired my first people in Algeria, some have never seen a contract, an employee contract. They were just hired like this, and hired by large pharmaceutical companies. But we decided to come with procedures that were from, like top procedures, like elsewhere in the world. Treat people well, make contract, give them rights, So in some ways, you got to adapt to the situation. And in some other ways, you want also to have companies that works with, like international procedures to better prepare people locally. But then, of course, if they want to go international, so then they are prepared.
Thank you so much for that point, Adam. You are absolutely right. Now, Amanda, this one is for you. Adam spoke about how we have to consider the environment if we as people in STEM want to transition into careers that are not necessarily in academia. And you've started your own NGO, for example. I just wanted to ask you that we all know that there are gatekeepers, in these different spaces that people want to enter, right? I wanted to ask you, in your experience, how do we, as somebody who has entered these spaces that were probably hard, for example, how do you make it more welcoming for people who want to enter these very difficult spaces, considering the environment?
Okay, yes. Thank you, Annie. So in my own perspective, I've had experiences. Now, it could be ill experiences and negative experiences, then better experiences. Unfortunately, in Africa, we still have this mentality of, having certain knowledge and, keeping it to yourself, or, you just want to do it on your own. And it's something I experienced, starting my nonprofit organization. So, I started with an open mind, willing to learn. I was asking questions, but I've noticed that I was getting some certain kind of rivalry, in between, because some people have been in the system for say 10 years, but I don't know whether I seemed like a threat or something. But on the other hand, they don't know that it requires all of our work, putting things together, because I cannot do it alone. They cannot do it alone. Our continent, sadly, is still way behind. We have experience. We know what's happening in Singapore, for example, or in the USA. You see how they invest so much in research and STEM, but we don't see it happen here. And when you try to bring it here, there are some kind of hitches, and this reception is really low. But in my own perspective, I try to share my knowledge to young girls or people who are starting to build their initiatives around STEM, especially when they want to talk or focus on women and girls. Now, we see a lot of social exclusion existing in countries like Nigeria, where in the north, they don't even believe that basic education is a girls. So these are, hitches that are there. And in the north, for example, we have millions of them. So typically for them, they feel that, when the girl is age 15 or 14, she is supposed to get into marriage. So you see that their dreams are really like hot shots. And these are trying to address. So in gatekeepers, I just want to say that it's not all that will be receptive towards you. There are some that may not. Division and so on the other hand, you will see people who want to support you. I tell myself that no matter what happens, the show must go on.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Definitely, the show must go on. Now, Samira, I'm going to bring you back in here now. So we spoke about gatekeepers and occupying spaces that were previously difficult for people to get into. And I'm sure you can attest to that because you are an associate professor at one of the top universities in the world. And I'm sure you had your own fair share of experiencing all of that. So now I wanted to ask you, now that you are, maybe in your view, you haven't reached the pinnacles of success or you want to reach, but to some of us who can listen to your bio, we can tell that you're pretty successful. So I wanted to ask you, what legacy do you hope the work that you are doing, be it in research or the people who you are interacting with, do you hope to leave in the end?
Wow, I mean, I actually wasn't expecting that question, but it's one that I'm happy to answer. That's obviously a very tough question, and I'm very early in my career. I feel like I'm very proud of what I've been afforded and what I've been able to accomplish, but I know that there's much work to be done. I recognize that. And in this role, I think one of the things that I hope that people would learn or recognize is that, from my training of other students. So if you look at for those who are on this, you can visit my lab's website and you can see the excellence in that group. And I want people to recognize that there's talent everywhere. And it's whether you're willing to look at it or even recognize it. And so we have people in my lab from different countries in Africa. We have folks from India, with China, here in America. And so, and we're very proud of what we do, and we know that we're doing work that we are proud of, and we hope that others are also excited about. So really, I really just think that just recognizing that there's nothing diminishing of excellence when it comes to diversity. I think sometimes people associate the word diversity or just having a diverse team with somehow having compromised excellence. And I really do think that that's not true. So my hope is that some of the work that we're doing would make sure that becomes something that others recognize, that talent does exist everywhere, and it's just people have to be open-minded and willing to see it, because like we talked about, there are different cultures. People excellence can present itself very differently. In the United States, it's a culture that probably rewards people who are very who can sometimes be very loud and very, can either just promote themselves. And there are some cultures where you just don't do that. You're taught to be very humble about things, right? Or to kind of just be quiet, and some people have introversion tendencies. So I think that just recognizing that people can present very differently but still be excellent in what they do would hopefully be what my group accomplishes in a way that transforms how people in our environment at least treat others who look like us. And going back to the question of being in places where it might be tough for others to navigate, is being open-minded. I think several of the panelists have already pointed out to that, really being open-minded. No matter what you know, I always enter a space feeling like I want to leave this space learning something that I didn't know before, or I know I'm going to learn something. It could be a good thing or a bad thing, but it would still be useful to learn that. And so just being open-minded when you enter spaces, and asking questions, letting people know who you are, like introducing yourself, networking, right? Because sometimes someone might see you give a talk somewhere, and then and through that could lead to other opportunities. But if you don't put yourself out there, you just might not be seen, and being seen is a key aspect of being successful and making sure that is recognized in the field. So yes, there will be people who are willing to help, but you have to also recognize that you have to give people the opportunity to help you, right? Give them the chance. I think one of the things that came out from the previous panel was sending your CVs to people and telling them what you're capable of, or what you can do, right? So make their job very easy so they can visualize where you fit. And that could be a way to get opportunities from people who really, who can make that difference in your life. I hope that was helpful. And if I think about it, just not going to add.
No, that was. And thank you for answering my question. Now, the questions are coming in quick and fast. So I'm going to open the Q&A session. And the first question is for Yaw. And this one is from Aminata, who asks, was it hard going from the Western education system to an African one? If so, what advice would you give someone who's interested in starting a lab on the continent after post-grad training?
So I would say it wasn't difficult for me sort of transitioning to the systems. I mean, I think at least in the sciences, in Ghana, we sort of skew a bit towards the British system. We were a former British colony. So we don't have assistant professors. We have lecturers, we have senior lecturers, then you get associate and full professor, so that is a little bit different. So, in the US, you start off as assistant professor. It's just a name. So in terms of in the sciences, a lot of actually the science that we do in Ghana, because the funding significantly comes from either the US or from Europe, the system works very much the same. You're expected to write grants, you live or die by grants in many ways. You're expected to publish, you're expected, so the requirements of faculty are similar. The challenge really is funding. There are fewer grants, or there are fewer calls that you qualify for. If I was based in the US, I could apply to any NIH call that suited the subject area. I could apply to a number of private, American Heart Association, American Lung Association, whatever association it is, there are lots of grant calls available. In Africa, the pool is smaller. There are more than there were 5-10 years ago. Probably there were more than there were 2 years ago. There are a number of calls, but they're incredibly competitive, because at the same time, the number of people doing research in Africa is rapidly increasing. So we keep training more and more people. We keep emphasizing people need to get PhDs. I always say, but what about beyond the PhD? There's less thought or less money currently available for people like me who already have a PhD and who are trying to build a research program. So the challenge for anybody coming to establish a lab is you need to think very carefully about what are you going to study. I'll put it simply, certain things are more fundable in Africa than others, and that's unfair, and it's not the way it should be, and we hope it'll change. But currently, because there's no money, there's no really very little government money outside of South Africa, which has a medical research council. Very few African countries have public money supporting research. All the grants I have are from Europe or from North America, right? So you are constantly having to write what overseas funders will fund. And that is personally why, part of the reason why I've started my company, because I'm tired of being hemmed in by a system that I cannot control. Now, not all of us were going to start biotech companies, but that, just in response to that question, the challenge is not so much academic system. Academic excellence. You figure out the nuances. It's not a big deal. The problem that is going to happen is your funding. And so you need to think very carefully about where your funds will come from, and just how competitive it's going to be. It is extremely cutthroat, and I won't lie, it's stressful. But we keep it moving.
And you have. I love how you said that you wanted to start your biotech company because there was not enough. You're being forced to do research that was not necessarily for people in Africa. So kudos on that.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just add, sorry, I'm hogging but if I could just bounce off of that point, the idea is Africa needs a self-sustaining research ecosystem. And I am convinced that biotech, I'm sure Adam will agree with me, is going to be extremely crucial to that. Who funds research in America? It's Bill Gates. Where did Bill Gates get his money from? He got his money from tech, right? So we need African Gates. We need African Zuckerberg. So we need a tech industry that can put money. We need African GSKs and AstraZenecas, right? Those don't just sprout on, they don't just come from the sky. They come when people decide to start companies. And when that happens, then our public, our NIHs will also, we're going to go in the opposite direction from America. We have to get private money to fund public institutions, but that's what we need to do. And so I'll encourage everybody on this listening to me to think about that, because I think that's what it's going to take to help Africa.
Thank you so much on that point. I'm going to move on to somebody else's question. This one I think you can take, Adam. Chisomo asks, for the panelists who have worked or currently in the diaspora, do you believe it's possible to make impactful changes in STEM and research when you're not living in the continent? If so, what are some of the best ways to go about doing so?
Great question. I mean, all the questions are great, but this one is typically very interesting about, how to exist and make an impact wherever you are. We have an example here with Yaw and Samira. Wherever they are, they're making an impact. So I'm not, I don't think that the location is really that important. I mean, the most important thing for me is the mindset. Are you prepared? Are you willing to make that impact? I mean, Yaw would describe it just brilliantly just right now, and what Samira is doing with welcoming all, students and professionals from all over the world is that, if you have that mindset, you can make, the impact. I mean, it's just a matter of will. And for that, some are better, more prepared, and some must be taught. It can be taught. I mean, it's just like, it's not a natural gift from from God or whatever you want to consider it. I mean, like you need to have it, whatever the way you have it. Is it like innate or acquired? To use the term that we are used to. And for me, I think if we are prepared to make that impact. Yesterday, I told the panelists here that I was in a very big conference, and there were like amazing people, and one of them was saying something true about we have, for example, a lack of pharmaceutical industry in Africa. Some countries are importing 99% of the drugs they are using, and of course biotech is amazing. But also, like just regular tech, it's like regular basis. We don't even have them, and there's also some incentive to be done here There was a question, sorry for talking about this, and probably you were thinking of giving that question to someone else, about it. That proverb says, like, it takes a village to grow a child. Incidentally, yesterday I used that proverb in my conference, and I say, yes, it's great, but our villages are missing doctors. In France, you have one doctor per 350 people. In some countries in Africa, you have one doctor per 50,000 people. We're not playing in the same field. So what can we do with a village where doctors are lacking? And so if you want to prepare to make an impact, just go and study the figures, look at the continent. And to finish with this, we used to say, because we love to have this vision of one Africa, it is not. It is not. There are some differences. There are multiple Africas. And what we have to do is that in those different villages, we have to work together, not to compete. And once you start something somewhere, you need to attract people from the other Africas, to build something that could be sustainable, because we don't have solvent markets, right? We don't have, sometimes very tiny countries that make it difficult for entrepreneurs to have a sustainable business. So we need, to work together across all Africas, those different Africas, whether they're French-speaking, English-speaking, more advanced, less advanced, agricultural-based, industrial-based. We need to figure out what Africa is, have a clear picture about it, and then address that to the STEM students. Look, there are tremendous possibilities in that continent. Absolutely tremendous possibilities. Let's work on that. I mean, there's a brilliant future for the students. Frankly, there's a brilliant future for the students here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam. Amanda, I'm gonna bring you in here. We got a question from Chileshe, who wanted to add more on the topic that we spoke about, gatekeeping. And they wanted to find out, have you faced any challenges, with negotiating payment or salaries, compensation with what is offered to expats for some of the work or qualifications that you have done? So if so, how may you have navigated this?
Okay. Well, I don't really have prior knowledge in, say, transactions and all, but on the human resource part, we see a lot of segregation and exclusion happening. Say, for example, you may have like an initiative that you want to execute, like in an underserved community. Certain kind of organizations, or maybe, let me just say, esteemed organizations may not feel comfortable with you deploying it, probably because your name is not like a resounding NGO or like a general thing that they know. So there's been a lot of reluctance. We don't really encounter or experience inclusion in this. So even in the part of your counterparts or like organizations, you see this division happening. But we still keep on pushing. We still keep on putting out what we want to do. And on the other hand, we've been fortunate to like leverage on like international organizations, for example, in, say, funding projects and collaborating or partnering with us to ensure that we are able to carry out whatever project that we want to do, especially in underrepresented communities. So I don't know if that answers that, although I don't have prior knowledge in the financial transaction aspect of it.
No, Amanda, that was actually, I loved how you bring in that element, especially because you work with NGOs. It must be difficult when people sometimes might prefer somebody with a particular sounding name as opposed to you who might have the same experience. So thank you for bringing in that element. The last question that we have in this Q&A is for Samira, and this one comes from Aminata. They ask, as a first-generation immigrant, how do you deal with imposter syndrome as you are going through training and establishing your own lab?
Wow. So this is great. And I think this is a very unique crowd, because many of us growing up in Ghana, I was never in an environment where I had to justify my presence based on what I looked like, because everybody looked like me, and the things that usually made people stand out is whether they're doing well or not. So there was really not that. So I think that I feel like that was a really good training to have when I was or at least that was a very good experience for me in Ghana. So when I came here, I felt like I wasn't being distracted by too many things because I truly feel that a lot of the factors that influence the feeling of imposter syndrome is really incited by the environment. So I pay attention to what environment I enter. I always ask myself, is this a place where I will be supported, celebrated? And would I be able to make an impact in this environment? If these things don't align well, I just, fine. So it's so important. I think you have to be in an environment that celebrates and appreciates who you are. But that being said, it doesn't mean that you would never end up in an environment where you might get these feelings. So just a good example is when I was at Harvard for a postdoctoral fellowship, I, of course, like many people, would expect that, everyone at Harvard must be incredibly bright. And there are a lot of bright individuals, but there are some folks that I also wondered if, they would have been there if they looked like me, or that if I was on the hiring or recruiting committee, I probably wouldn't have selected them. So I think you begin to, and I'm not saying that to mean anything bad about that environment per se, but there are people in some of these environments that are probably not what you think, because I think usually it's because we just assume that others are better at something, but in many cases they are not, and they might not be any better than you are. So I tell, for example, students in my lab that they got in my lab because they were good. I mean, they were good. So like, you don't get in that space because I thought you weren't qualified or anything. So you come into that space. Your job is to focus on being excellent, taking care of yourself, and just doing the excellent job that you've been doing that got you there. So for me, I think that mindset is very helpful. And again, I cannot emphasize the importance of really being in an environment that is really, so one of the advice that I got is always to go to places where I'm celebrated. And so even when I was searching for a faculty position, I asked myself, well, do I see myself making an impact in this place? Would I be able, are these colleagues that I would actually enjoy interacting with? Would I really love having a cup of coffee with these people or talking to them? Because I think in so many ways, it tells you a lot about an environment, how you would feel when you're in that environment, if you feel comfortable enough to interact with people at that level. And again, also like my age, and of course I'm very young. So I think if you look at, folks in the department, they might not look like me, not just because of the color of my skin, but also age is a factor. But again, going back to this factor of know what you know, and you don't have to sell yourself short, right? You really don't have to sell. You should be humble, but that doesn't mean that you should act like you're stupid if you're not. So I think that there's really, it's really important to know what, yourself, you're good. There's really no reason for you to, and you have to give yourself a break. Everybody needs a break every once in a while. So these are things that for me, I think really help me. I'm an avid, practitioner of yoga. And I think it's one of the things that bring me a sense of peace and self-awareness, and just kind of being mindful in spaces that I am, to kind of help me overcome some of these challenges that I think can be crippling to so many.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that answer. I love what you said. Go to places where you are celebrated. And I think that is a great way to end off the panel.